because I asked her this question. I said, a lot of people are turning away from electoral politics. What do you think about this? But I want to know what you guys think. And again, there are a lot of different opinions about this, about the role that electoral politics plays in Medicare for All versus, or in addition to, activism and direct action.
Even though I don't agree with electoral politics, and the reason why I don't agree with it, because a lot of people feel that once that special someone they want to vote for gets in, all the problems are going to be solved, and that's not true. So in my mind, you need street heat, and you need electoral solutions. But again, you don't need electoral solutions in the sense that you need to focus on the person you want to get in. You need that person to pass that legislation, because again, we are going to need someone in office to pass any piece of legislation. That's just how it is, unfortunately. But other than that, that should be the only reason why you should even care about electoral solutions. You know that that's the end goal, to get whatever piece of legislation you need to get passed, not because they can solve the issue. You need that individual to force them to solve your issue. So again, you still need that pressure. You still need that street heat, because again, every social movement, every piece of legislation that ever got passed started from the street first, then it got into electoral solutions. So you still need the street heat. You still need that person to actually do the job and force them to do that.
So all I want to say to that is, activism is your get out the vote ground game. We have let the politicians dictate what the conversation is.
Right.
We need to flip that. The tail's wagging the dog.
Right. Absolutely. 100%. 100%. I mean, again, I said this on the podcast the other day. Like, I said, there's no difference between AOC and Joe Crowley. I know a lot of people disagree with that. And a lot of people was like, how dare you think that AOC is just as bad or just as worse or whatever. It's not the point that I'm making. Every politician have a job. They're not going to put you as a priority first. It's just not. Because if it did, we would have Medicare for all right now. You still need to pressure whoever is in office. If I have to pressure you, you're not an ally. That's how I feel. I'm sorry if people get upset. If I have to pressure you, you're not an ally. So in my mind, they're all the same. But again, like I said, their whole goal, for me, is to pressure them to get what I want. I'm not looking to them and say I'm voting for them, and I feel comfortable that they're going to do the job. That's not going to happen. I know I have to pressure that person, whoever it is, whether that is Bernie, whether that's Nina, whether that's AOC, whether that's Jamil Jayapal. I look at all of them. I have to pressure them and get them to do what I want. They're not the end. They're just a hurdle that we have to cross.
They're means.
They're means to an end. Absolutely.
My take on this is, let me put it this way. My electoral is activism, because if the electorate knows what needs to happen, then when they go to those polls, of course they're going to pick the best candidate, right? So they are not mutually exclusive in my mind, okay? But I am of the place that I've got there at this point. But I will tell you this, I am most certainly going to lift up community activists in their ask or in their need.
Right.
Way more so, that's how I'm going to spend my energy, so that when they've got to go to the polls, right, in the last 2 weeks, when people really start paying attention to who's running and why, hopefully they're going to be like, okay, these are my issues. Where do these guys on this ballot land? Instead of going and saying, well, I don't really know who anybody was, so I just pulled the lever on the Democratic side or the Republican side or whatever. That's what's wrong in America, and we have to change that culture. That's my take.
Right.
For all. What do you think it's going to take for the politicians in office, the electeds, to catch up with public opinion? Even when you add in Republicans, the right, the majority of folks still support Medicare for all?
We have midterm elections next year, and we have to get very, very busy around those, including and most specifically around the primaries. And people need to find out in every town hall, do you or do you not stand for Medicare for all? If people go to candidatesummit.com, I have endorsed some primary candidates who do stand as part of their platform for Medicare for all. And let's be very clear, the Democratic establishment is not supporting those candidates. So we, the people, have to support them, just as so many people are out supporting Nina Turner today in Cleveland and Akron. We shouldn't kid ourselves, and I don't think most people do. There's a limit to how much these rallies matter. They are important to go to because of the energy that it creates, but in terms of real electoral change, we have to get involved in these primaries. And the Democratic establishment feels, for the most part, that the centrist candidates, the corporatist Democrats, have a better chance of winning. I don't feel that way, especially when you see that 70% of the American people support Medicare for all, and a tiny margin of even Republicans support Medicare for all. I think it's absurd to say that the more progressive candidates who stand for that would not win. What's really going on there is that those Democrat establishment moderate corporatist candidates feel that they would lose support with their own corporate donors. So we all have to get very busy with electoral politics right now. And when I say right now, it's because of these primaries.
All right. So any response to what Marianne had to say? Lisa.
I totally agree with her. And again, if you're tied into an activist community in your area, right? People are going to be talking about who's running.
Right.
I don't know how you separate out activism from electoral. Don't confuse doing campaign push with, I mean, that is an electoral function, okay? But the people of the United States have looked at that as like the only thing that they can do. Find a candidate and push the candidate. And then the candidate gets into office, and what do? Pivot, right? They even talk about it. If you listen to some of the politicos, the real wonky folk, they'll be like, okay, well, they got in, so let's wait for the pivot. Like they anticipate it, right? They know that people are going to run on stuff and then they're not going to deliver. If you get your community going and you take a stand on, these are the things that we need to deal with because I've got a cracker plant going to open up. I've got a pipeline coming in. I've got fracking beds all over the place, blah, 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 right? And I get the community. And I'm talking community. I don't care if you've got a red or a blue practice jersey on. That's got nothing to do with anything. We're talking about what are the community needs. If you get the communities going, then they're going to come out and they're going to vote and they're going to call and they're going to pressure and they're going to question. And all of a sudden now, you're going to get the politicians going, holy crap, I've got one hell of a healthcare activist community in Allegheny County. And you're not going to want to ignore us because trust me, we're in a lot more places than just sitting here with you, Jen, right? I mean, I've got my activist red beret hat on. You haven't even scratched the surfaces to the pots that I've got my hands in. That's what we do, right? And the more you get your hands in the pot, we get to stir it. And we need those politicians to not be able to ignore the people on the ground. That's how we build momentum. That's what the march did. Everybody that stood up to say, hey, I'll do a march, they're people on the ground in a community that believe in Medicare for all. And I will bet you that every single one of those activists has got a litany of things that they've got their hands in, just like I do.
Right.
Makes sense. How about you, Sharif? What do you think about what Marianne said?
Oh, I'm going to have to disagree with Marianne, actually. I love Marianne Williamson. She did a fantastic job. I actually had a chance to talk to her for a little bit. But I feel that's part of the problem. I feel that too many people invest all their energy into electoral solutions, and nobody, once they vote for someone, they feel that's it. I did my job already. I voted. I canvassed for this person. I did phone banking. What else do they need for me to do? And so I mentioned this earlier that you kind of need both. You need an inside and outside strategy. I personally feel it doesn't matter who's in office because you still have to pressure that person to do whatever it is you need them to do. I mean, I do understand the mechanism that it's easier to pressure, say, someone like Nita Turner than it is someone like the person she ran against. So I totally agree with that. I would never say that it's harder. One candidate is easier than the other, or one candidate is harder than the other. We'll never argue that because there's proof of that. So it's easier to get someone else to get them to lean towards your position than someone else will. However, I look at it as if I still have to pressure you to do something, you're not an ally for me. And so it's gonna be really hard for me to ever like invest in electoral politics in the future because of so much of my community, so much has been going on. It's not still being properly represented. And so I do agree that you do need both because again, we need the street heat. We need people out there in the street and be politically active. But at the same time, I still need to push any politician who gets into office to pass Medicare for all, no matter who it is. And so they're not going to just willingly do it. If any candidate in office that willingly do it, I would send home and spend time with my kids. Unfortunately, that's never going to happen. So I have to push them. We got to be active. But I do hear a point. There is a difference between certain candidates, and we do need to highlight those folks. But at the end of the day, once they get into office, it gets a little different. It gets a little tricky. You know, it's a whole other world once they get in office.